Is sport or entertainment more important? Now, this is actually a really difficult question to answer, because it depends on what we define as sport and entertainment. But in general, when we hear these two words, we usually think about two very different things. Sport, an activity that we engage in for the purposes of exercise and fitness, as well as competition and recreation. Well, it's officially called sports entertainment, so I guess it's both. But when it comes down to it, the outcomes are scripted and predetermined. Now, moving on to mixed martial arts, combat sport that features a combination of punches, kicks, elbows, and knees, as well as submissions and sometimes even biting and eye gouging. Now, unlike wrestling, the outcome of an MMA fight is not predetermined, and some people would argue that this makes it a true sport. For example, judo is a combat sport that focuses more on throws and submissions than on striking. And this is what makes them so popular today. But what about non-combat sports? Sports like baseball, football, and soccer. These sports are even more popular than combat sports, and they even more heavily influenced by the entertainment industry. But they do complement each other, and in many cases they go hand in hand. Just remember that it's all done in the name of entertainment, and that ultimately makes the sport more popular and more profitable. And in a world where athletes are trying to make a living playing their favorite sport, that's a good thing. Now, if you're a purist who doesn't appreciate the theatrics and the trash talk that goes on around many modern sports, that's perfectly fine. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more great content. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Oh, but
You have to admit that these things do add to the entertainment value of these sports.
oh,
And in a world where everything is trying to compete for our attention, this is a good thing. For example, football games now feature elaborate halftime shows and soccer games have cheerleaders. Now, some people might argue that these things detract from the athletic integrity of these sports, but they're very popular with the fans. This makes it more technical and less reliant on trash talk and theatrics. But even in judo, there is still some trash talk and theatrics. And more entertaining, even though purists might argue that this is due to the lack of skill on display. But the fact is that the unpredictability of these games makes them more exciting to watch. And this is why they generate higher TV ratings. Now, the NFL tries to counteract this trend by scheduling games in such a way that the worst teams play each other. But this isn't always possible, and sometimes we're treated to blowouts where the weaker team wins. Now, these games might not be great for the sport of football, but they're great for television, and they're great for entertainment. For example, the trash talk is usually kept to a minimum during the fight itself. But the competitors will often make weight in front of each other at the weigh-ins, and then they stare each other down. This helps to build up the animosity between them, and it makes the match more entertaining. Now, the argument could be made that the theatrics and the trash talk that goes on before and sometimes even during the fights is just that, theatrics. But the truth is, the trash talk is usually pretty personal, and the bad blood between fighters is very real. Conor McGregor, for example. Before his fight against Nate Diaz at UFC 202, McGregor said that he was going to box the ears off Diaz. Now, whether or not you believe that statement, the fact is that McGregor's trash talk definitely added to the entertainment value of that fight, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, the physical risks and the athleticism required to perform the stunts are 100% real. But what about when the fighting actually starts? Now, it's no secret that MMA is a violent combat sport. Now, these sports have been around for centuries, and they're renowned for their technical aspects and their high level of athleticism. But they also have their fair share of trash talk and theatrics. For example, Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao are two of the best boxers of our generation. And their fight in 2015 was one of the most highly anticipated events in sporting history. But despite the hype, the fight itself was pretty boring. Now, this wasn't because the boxers weren't talented. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Mayweather's defensive skills were so good that he was able to frustrate Pacquiao and prevent him from landing any meaningful punches. Now, some people might argue that this makes the fight a bad example of what combat sports are supposed to be all about. But the fact is that the fight generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And that's because people love to watch combat sports. Even if the fight isn't particularly exciting, there's always the chance that something spectacular might happen. And this unpredictability is what makes combat sports so entertaining. And that the fighters are constantly in danger of being seriously injured. But the truth is that this danger adds to the excitement of the fights and makes them more entertaining to watch. Now, some people might argue that this is a bad thing, but the fact is that humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years, and we're naturally curious about how these fights will play out. This is why MMA is such a popular sport today. And it's also why some people might argue that it's more entertainment than sport. And so it's a perfect blend of a live stunt show and a soap opera. Entertainment, something we do for fun, for enjoyment, something that can be either active or passive. But when we take a closer look at the world of professional sports, we begin to realize that the line between sport and entertainment is not nearly as clear-cut as we might expect. Professional sports are now a multi-billion-dollar industry, and as with any business, the bottom line is always going to be profit. Now, some people might argue that the athletic achievements of the players is enough to make sport an art form. But there's no denying that the drama and the pageantry surrounding the game has become just as important, if not even more important than the sport itself. So let's talk about that today. Is sport or entertainment more important? Take wrestling, for example. Is it a sport or is it entertainment? And I know that not everyone watches wrestling for the athletic feats that the performers pull off, but trust me, when it comes to someone like John Cena, it's not all fake. He definitely can and does deadlift over 600 pounds. In fact, he holds multiple powerlifting records. For example, he once lifted a 345-pound Atlas stone up onto a 7-foot platform in just under 2 seconds. And while the outcome of his matches might be predetermined, the pain he inflicts on his opponents is very real. And Cena takes great pride in being one of the most devastating wrestlers of all time. So when it comes to professional wrestling, the athletes definitely deserve some respect for their abilities. But again, at the end of the day, it's still entertainment. In fact, most MMA fans probably enjoy the fact that their favorite fighters are unafraid to get in each other's faces and exchange some verbal jabs before their bouts. But what about when it comes to traditional combat sports like boxing and Muay Thai? Now, it's important to note that not all combat sports are the same. Overall, combat sports are a unique blend of athleticism, skill, and entertainment. In fact, the NBA has found that games featuring teams with losing records tend to be more exciting, and that's the thing. We have to separate sport and entertainment because they're not the same thing. So the next time you re-watching your favorite sport, and you notice something that you think is detracting from the athletic integrity of the game, now what do you guys think? Is sport or entertainment more important?